selling for £900,000. Congratulations. L002.
That's something that I'm very keen on promoting, is telling the history of art on the continent. So not just the young emerging artists of the 21st century, but also the story of African art through the 20th century and the artists who, as you refer to them, would be considered the masters. We're seeing certain artists pulling ahead. So somebody like Gerard Sokoto from South Africa can sell for up to $1 million. Ben Nwumwu from Nigeria has made £1 million. But they're few and far between, and those prices are quite rare. I would like to see those names consistently making 6 or 7 figures at auction. And there are 2 factors at play. Not only does the international art world need to embrace them as important artists, but you also need to see the buyers in those countries valuing their own artists as well, and paying those kind of prices. In my time here, in the 2 years that we've been hosting sales, we've broken over 60 world records for African artists, so different world records, which is huge. I'm not going to go through them all. Some of the most significant have been for bigger names who maybe are in the international market, but the fact that they broke records in African sale is quite interesting. So somebody like Yinka Shonibara and Adisenu-doe, also William Kentridge, Marlene Dumas, all the biggest names from Africa, Sotheby's have held records for. At the same time, one of my biggest satisfactions is bringing more African artists to Sotheby's sales and to the international secondary market. Demographics-wise, I think that was the biggest change I saw when I moved to Sotheby's and started hosting sales here. My experience before that was that our collectors were mostly African, whether living on the continent or in the diaspora. But since I've been at Sotheby's, the demographics have changed a lot. We've really opened up to a very international market. So typically in our sales we have over 200 bidders, and they come from every continent, from over 30 different countries.
4 years ago, with really some quite high profile people. We did it with someone called Nika Dangote, who you may have heard of, and also a chap called Femi Otedola, who's another big Nigerian. And the main premise there was to get young collectors in. We had about 400 young people in, and barely one of them was involved in the auction the next day. So it's a lovely romantic notion of getting young collectors in, but it doesn't work, because young people are afraid. And even if they have a bit of money, I mean, you look at, a very good example is about 4 or 5 years ago, I had a conversation with an agent here in London who thought it would be a very good idea to try to get young African footballers in the Premier League. These are people who are very highly paid, huge amounts of money. So the money's not a barrier. Get them involved in buying modern and contemporary African art. Absolutely hopeless. These people have no interest in art. They want to buy fast cars, watches, girls, all those kind of things. That's what they're interested in. You look at somewhere like South Africa, it has one of the most developed gallery networks of anywhere. You go to Cape Town and Johannesburg, and there are a huge number of art dealerships and galleries. So you look at the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa, I agree, there's not many. There's a few in Lagos, not many. A couple in Kenya, there aren't many. What do I think about it? I'm not going to go and set up a dealership over there. The main reason for it is there is no publicly funded arts program. It's got to be profitable, because no one would do it if it's not.
The 2 years I was preparing the fair, I was researching, trying to find what was going on in the market. I could see that there had been a few very important exhibitions, but almost every 5 years. So you had one like Les Magiciens de la Terre, and I think it was in 1989, which was actually very interesting to know that was the first time that artists were exhibited alongside established artists, in the world. When you think about it, it's crazy, it's so late. And then, there was a very important exhibition every 5 years. I think there was another one after that, organized by Okwin Wazor at the time in the US. And then you had one that was called Africa Remix, organized by, I think it's maybe Simon Njami, exactly. And then it was that, but there was big events like this every 5 years, and then nothing for another. So I would say 154 definitely shed a light on the market, and I think people love talking about prices, and collectors love to be involved with the new discovery of something. So I think 154 participated definitely to the visibility. But at the same time, I think you had amazing curator that did amazing academic work, in the background for years. That started to help also, building those artists' careers. Do I see a huge difference right now from them? No. But I think that they might be more willing to buy in 2 to 5 years, or I'm not saying even that they're not buying, they're buying, but do they make a real difference, for galleries today, and do they do it with an intention to build a collection? I'm not really sure yet that this is how they buy. So if they are present, they will buy one piece, which is great, but one piece, and then they won't buy for a while, which is normal because it requires a lot of budget to buy. What I find is that there's also for every pocket on the African art market, so we have quite affordable entry-level prices, so that for me I saw that we were attracting a younger generation of collectors. We might, hear in a couple of years that, now the prices are too expensive for African collectors, to buy their own art, which obviously I don't want that to happen, but like those artists lives in Africa, they usually, had a couple of shows in Africa. If they were not bought in their own country, there's nothing I can do about it, If then we make them interesting enough for them to be interesting enough to them, and they can't afford them, this is another problem that we will be dealing with. But I know that one point, we will hear that some artists are too expensive for the local art market, etc. But when they had the occasion to buy them at the right price, they didn't do it, So it's you can't win, basically.
Went to the Venice Biennial again when I was very young in 2001, and at the time they had the Authentic Eccentric show, which was curated by Salah Hassan and Olu Ogwibi, and that's where I met a lot of the kind of collaborators that I went on to work with in later years. And I remember saying to myself at the time, I'm like, one day I'm going to do something here, and it's going to be right at the center, and it's going to be Ghanaian, it's not going to be African. I met the director and the chairman. I said, would it be possible for us to still join, because it was quite late in the day. It was just a year before. Normally you apply 2 years before. And they said yes. I said, can I look at spaces? I want to be in the center. They said yes. They showed me a space. I was like, I'll take it. But we hadn't gone to the ministry or anything yet. But it was like, it was a space that there was no spaces left. They were going like hotcakes. We didn't know where we'd get the money from. But it was just like a kind of great momentum. And then we got Okwi on board, who, as you know, is like one of the most important African curators of our time, and also had been artistic director of Venice, so was incredible in helping us to navigate. I don't know how we would have done it without him. In terms of the selection of artists, I think, one thing that informed, at the beginning I was thinking of just taking one artist, one like a really obscure artist that nobody had heard of, and really kind of working with them. But then because it was our first time, and also because we happened to have like a bunch of Ghanaian artists both living in and outside of Ghana that are at the top of their game, that are really mastering the language, the narrative, the machinery of the international art world. It was like, what will happen if we put all of those people together in one room? I've been in spaces where all of us have been in a room together, or many of us, and there's a kind of magic that happens, there's a kind of alchemy that happens. And so I was like, what if I took that alchemy and just showed it to the world? What would happen? And actually what happened was exactly what I, not what I expected, but what I kind of hoped would happen, that the alchemy would kind of resonate outwards. And so, yeah, obviously there were 6 artists, and then I really wanted to kind of create a show of binaries. So I wanted there to be like a real balance in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of medium as well. And so each of the works spoke to each other in multiple ways. So there was like a discourse, like a hidden kind of underlying discourse with each of the works. I put Ibrahim and L on either sides of each other. Like there was very much a kind of the discourse between the master and the kind of, not the new, because they're not so new, but like the master and the kind of person coming to take the master's place. So there's Ibrahim and L. There was Lynette Yanamboachi with her portraits, and Felicia Aban, who's the first female photographer, with her portraits. And then there was John Akomfo and Selassie with the film work. And each of their kind of binaries kind of spoke in there was a kind of dialectic between their work as well, in terms of the big, it's really huge sculptural everyday archives of Ibrahim and L, in terms of the filmic work. There was quite a lot of archive, I guess, the filmic work of John talking about migration, resilience, loss, and then Selassie's work talking about again, very similar themes of loss and resilience and transformation. And then it all came together in this theme of Ghana freedom, which is the E.T. Mensah song, and in which in the song spoke of the optimism of like our newly found independence, and like really thinking about what's happened to that independence, that optimism since independence.
2019 Venice Biennale, Ghana participated for the first time with its national pavilion, and it was quite exciting because you had artists like Elana Tree, John Akomfo, Lynette Boachi Yadom, Selassie Sosu, and Felicia Aban, who is of a much older generation, of course, but the works that were placed within the exhibition were very significant and very exciting because they were very different forms of work. And also David Ajayi took quite some time to design the pavilion, so each artist had a very specific space which was dedicated to their work, so it was very contextual. But at the same time, the way the wall spaces were conceived, it somehow tied the entire exhibition together, which I thought was done very beautifully. But again, as I discussed with the curator and also some of the participants, the only criticisms I have is that it's very important for us to invest labor and money and time actually into developing the art system within our communities here on the continent, because we find that mostly we spend a lot of money on doing big exhibitions abroad, whereas we could develop the infrastructure here, whereas we don't put so much into that. So that was one of the very important and significant things that we had to discuss, because the idea of Venice has to be able to at least reflect or come back to affect the system. It should have been the other way around, that we have a very vibrant art system with like all the social infrastructure support and network systems, and that would in turn produce something like Venice. But then now that Venice has been done, I think that it's about time that we invest a significant resource into like developing like institutional spaces on the continent. SCCA actually was conceived originally as a studio space, because in 2014, when I did the Pangea show, before that, I had done a residency in London at Gasworks, and I was mostly spending time developing ideas. And I always spoke about the idea that it would be important to develop spaces, because my whole practice from the beginning has been about looking into spaces, the narrative of spaces, spaces in decay and things like that. But at the same time, I've also always been interested in how artists could somehow contribute to the development of spaces for exhibitions and also for making work and things like that. So I decided to build a studio space in 2014. And my father owned this land in Tamale, which we had a conversation, and then he gifted the land to me for the construction of the studio space. So he himself, as an engineer, he volunteered his labor and his time to build it. So we started working on it. And a year after, I decided that I was going to start working on the studio space, which is separate from SCCA. And I decided, why not just keep SCCA as a space for exhibitions in the future because it's right in the center of town, and rather concentrate on building a studio on this other land that I had bought. So for me, the idea of producing something is very important. So I was trying to conceive of SCCA, the studio space, as almost as a warehouse or a factory space where things could be produced, but not on a commercial scale, but just a place of reflection and things like that. So when we decided to convert it into SCCA, we then decided to reshift some of the spaces around in a way that you could have a space where any kind of artwork could be conceived, whether a painting or a sculpture or even a grand installation. So for me, the idea has always been to somehow closely maintain the relationship between a studio space, which is a space of reflection and production, versus an exhibition space. I think both of those things can somehow inform each other. So SCCA is based on that idea. Yes, yeah, very much. I see this place as my practice, you know. It's not as if when I was building these, I saw them as buildings. I saw them as artworks I was producing. But these artworks would then become spaces which would contain new life and new forms, like land art, but in a way that the work itself becomes an entity, like an organism that contributes towards the growth of the community in a different way. So how do you create work that becomes a space for residencies, a space like an incubator for growing or nurturing young artists, projects and ideas, a space that can occupy archaeological objects or scientific or architectural ideas or things like that. I wanted to conceive of it in that regard because I spent a lot of time in factories and then also at the railways in Sekondi, Takoradi and other places, trying to collect objects, but also knowing that the architecture within those spaces and historically how that influenced even the way like labor and other things were organized in the production of like things. I thought, why not somehow borrow that idea and use it as part of the practice? Because before, I would go to these buildings and then I would cover the buildings with the jute sacks, or I would engage in various labor forms within them. But I thought also you can somehow borrow the ideas or the material conditions of those buildings and replicate them, which becomes another community in itself. So with regards to Mr. Dawson, I have been in conversation with him since 2015, a year after I started building SCCA. So we had a lot of conversations, and prior to that, of course, I was familiar with his practice. But then when I had started conceiving of the studio space, at that time it was just still a studio idea. But when I had a conversation with him in Nigeria, that was actually what influenced me to even think about turning it into a retrospective space to begin with. So I said, okay, why not do an exhibition with his work, and then subsequently for several years we'll dedicate it purely to just retrospective. Because it's very sad that a lot of the artists that did very significant work in the region, and also particularly in Ghana, till now there've not been any significant exhibitions that have somehow contextualized their works. Of course, at the university, Dr. Caricature and a couple of other professors always ask students to write on specific artists and somehow place their works into context. But on a national level, the state has never really invested time and energy into that, which I thought was another dimension that could have been added to it. So the influences from the art school, from caricature, and then some of the professors was something that I only thought that through my practice I could somehow stretch the boundaries of that in a way that if SCCA came into being, his work would be contextualized. And people like Dr. Akwe Jackson, whom we've been having discussions, and also he's written a lot about my work, and he's very serious about the practice, and he himself as an artist. I thought it would be very phenomenal if he curated a first exhibition. And Dawson has done a lot of very good work, very experimental works, unlike many of his contemporaries. He did a lot of different genres of works, paintings, collages, some sculptural pieces, works on paper, and the themes cut across many different ideas. So we thought that was a much better debut show, because it would pave way for a lot of the other works that were done within the last generations. The idea was also that the SCCA would be opened and constructed by the artists themselves, the students. So we worked also with the undergrad students at the university to actually build the entire exhibition. So everything you see at the exhibition was actually built completely by the students. And I think that is the whole point about building the community, to really understand that the artists can take responsibility for what they produce and also the infrastructure that exists around them in a way that also influences their own practices in terms of how they produce their own works in the future. Parliament of Ghost is an exhibition which was conceived specifically for MIF 2019. And 2 years ago, when I was invited to produce a work for the festival and also for the Westwest, I was trying to find an idea that could somehow resonate with both the space and then also the history of Manchester. In Ghana, in the late 19th century, when the railways was built by the British, there were a lot of objects that were brought there, like wood and other things, of course the trains, for the establishment of the railway, but also for the extraction and exploitation of resources. Yeah, so in the 50s, within the 50s and 60s, when within the period of independence, there was a lot of infrastructure that was created, of course, with this idea of expanding the network, and then also just creating spaces that would somehow accommodate all the different activities and also life forms that were emerging within this young country. But of course, post-60s period, when Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, a lot of the ideas that he was working on were abandoned, like some of the silos, and also his idea to expand the railway to meet all parts of the country and also go into Burkina Faso and all that. So the Parliament of Ghosts actually uses the crisis and the failures within that era through its objects, like the seats, which would have been in the third-class coaches, or the cabinets, which would have been used by the workers themselves. And a lot of these cabinets were made very early on in 1901, when the railway was established. So they're as old as the infrastructures themselves. But I think that the cabinets speak volume because they've contained a lot of memories and objects from these workers across time. So what I seek to do within the Parliament of Ghosts is combine the actual archival materials together with the objects themselves, which have somehow been lost within time. Yeah, so I had my undergrad training at KNUST at the Department of Painting and Sculpture. Back then, some of the younger professors, Dr. Karikacha, Kisi Erubuafo, and Prechum, they had just started teaching there not long ago, and they were very much interested in somehow expanding the scope of artistic practice in relation to the production systems and all that. So I guess it was more a matter of trying to look at art and really understand the histories of it and somehow projecting it into the future with relation to how artists could use the crisis that they were somehow embodied within their environment or community as a way of, let's say, producing new forms or new experiences.
I would attribute this to kind of changes that the young faculty brought to bear in teaching and making of art in the 21st century. We're still steeped in the early modernist teachings and way of making art and exhibition. But by the turn of the century, young faculty led by Karikacha Seidu, George Amperchum, and all others, including myself, Castro, and so on, decided to take a new direction towards this practice and look at what art is today. And so we, through the teachings of Kari and other philosophies from Africa and across the world and so on, we formed this communal way of working and teaching and dissemination of art. And so through teaching, collective manufacturing methods and exhibition and critique sessions, which happen quite often, even on weekends when we are not supposed to even be teaching. It brought us this far. We started with Ibrahim Mahama, who most of you must have heard of now, and then Kevin Hazel is there, Kwesi Ohini IUB. Lots more of these guys have been working on individual projects. We've got Larry, who's in the UK, I don't know whether he's still there, and then we got all others who are still working. We got a much younger group like Safo Black trying to come up with their own exhibitions and their own communal. So it's through these activities that they learn from, and so they collaborate to make art happen.
There have been exciting projects in the past, 10 years if I think back, in contemporary art. There are colleagues of mine that I greatly admire. Tracy Nakoshi Thompson, for example. Seja Tukwe Clotte, who's also a very important artist today. Ibrahim Mahama. There are people in the running art organizations like Atwanan and Adwamwa, who have been running the Foundation for Contemporary Art since for at least 12 to 13 years now. So these are individuals who are doing their thing, but which also significantly impacts the institutional base or the structural conditions that shape what some of us also do.
I think when I came, caricature, Castro, Bourgeois, they had already started a revolution in the art school, and I think their agenda was to be able to shift the production of art from just the idea of an artwork that occupies living rooms and just mini small gallery spaces to engage with art that was much more broader, more democratic, and could engage with the social and political and larger philosophical issues within the continent and the global space. So I think I joined the group, and what we realized in the art market is that by independence, 1957 onwards, the system of art distribution and the system of art markets that prevailed was something that was state-led. So a lot of artists, there were not too many galleries at the time, so state organized exhibitions, and individuals bought works from the state-planned exhibitions. And so that's what you see from 1950s all the way to the 1970s. A lot of state-run activities and a lot of people patronizing art through the state machinery. But between 1970 and 90, that's when we start seeing the emergence of the individual artists, the African modernist artists like Abladi Glover, Delaki, Takwame, a number of them. And also what emerged with their art practice was the gallery system. Through the gallery system, also other things emerged like art being exhibited in hotels and in other spaces. And so those channels, the hotels, the public space, and the gallery space became the avenues through which transactions happened. But over the years, that became hegemonic. That form of exhibition making, art market distributive systems, and the circuit through which art could be sold became narrow. And also the clientele almost became like a bit touristic, and it focused too much on the expat community and a few buyers from different part of Africa. Another big group that bought artworks from Ghana was the African American community. It meant that every art that would ever be produced by many of these artists had to fall within the living room concept. I think that was no different from the early stages of modern art in the West itself. It's just that this is 1970, 1990. So that meant that a number of art initiatives couldn't happen. Video was not considered, photography was not considered. And caricature has already done a lot of work in terms of the curriculum that produced this kind of thinking in his PhD. And so those were the things that Black Star Lines, with this emergence, sought to deal with. Was not just to say, painting cannot be within a certain format, but then we felt that we needed to have more, the space needed to be more democratic. So that's what Black Star Lines sought to do. But we felt that if we needed to make an impact in the market, the one space, the one thing that we needed to address was the production line.
Online project space is an incubator space for experimental work, especially in contemporary art. But when you talk about its conception, these ideas had been in the mind of faculty, as usual, also led by caricature from long ago. But Black Lines came into being in 2015. And the first exhibition we had was Silence Between the Lines at the Car Showroom in Kumasi. And since then, we've had several shows. So we produced various students and various artists. We tried to make the space an experimental space for all students, exchanges between students and international students and professors in art, practitioners, curators from all over the world coming. And we have art talks, we have other programs, we have exhibitions, and so on. So this collective way of thinking and making art and critiquing has brought us to a certain level now that we have now grown into from a tree with its roots to different branches. So we have younger groups graduating and forming other collectives like Asafo Black, like Fabene and his people, and others who have come through this college. And we affect society through the way we exhibit our work now. We don't privilege any medium, we don't privilege any material, we don't privilege any space. We go out there and exhibit in all kinds of spaces. And our work is for the masses, and we try to bring art closer to the people. And that is where we are now. We're still pushing hard.
I think one of the things that we needed to do was we said we were going to start from void. So we are starting from zero, number one. But number two, our playing field is not going to be a local playing field. The world is our playground, not just Ghana. So for our teaching, the student actually was not looking at the gallery system, and that was something that was really interesting. That was the first thing we needed to break. There was no gallery for the student to look up to. They made their artwork. We say you make the work out of faith, and you actually didn't even know the possible space your work could find itself in. So the students had to think beyond the gallery space first. They had to think beyond their limitation and rather even use those limitations as systems of production. So by teaching, we were not even looking at any gallery space or any market systems. We were just producing art with a mindset that if it begins to create some ripples locally and the ripples also hit the international system, then people would want it. And I think that's what we did, that as we started teaching with that mindset, locally, we started garnering some interest from different spaces, and also internationally, people felt that the work that was being produced here were really strong. Because in terms of teaching, in terms of books that students were going to read, we're not looking at just anything that was in Ghana. Any book that was good for any art student anywhere to read was a book we were going to use. So we looked at art in terms of, yes, it has to have its local relevance, but art is not designed for a local space. Yeah, so for me, I think one of the biggest challenge in the art is not the making, but in its distributive systems, was the lack of information about many of these developments. Because we talk about gallery system, dealer systems, collecting, okay, other centers had developed a much more sophisticated way of collecting, a much more interesting way, which fed into the global market systems, right? So sometimes the works were bought sporadically from different spaces, different times, and not always a certain coherent way of collecting artworks within a certain line. And I think that also could be a limitation of how we looked at history and how the whole history of art and all these things played into the system. So I know there are a number of collectors, but for now their collecting pattern is more of what they are interested in, and probably it's because of the way the market is. I'm sure if there's a stronger auction market and people know that their work is going to have a possible resale in some time to come, then they'll be more particular about the attitude with which they collect. So I think there's a collecting pattern. We will need probably some more research to be able to understand the nature and scope of collecting in Ghana. But for now, I think it's more of an interest base and and centered on what they can find.
In 1969, I started business school at Columbia University. I completed that program in 1971 and started working. So, I began to have more money. That's when I started paying attention to art and started gradually buying paintings I could afford. When I came to Africa, I settled in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, whose economy in 1973 was booming, basically. There was a lot of money around, a lot of new things, a lot of new ideas, a lot of art and so on. I bought a lot of art. At that time, I really hadn't decided to focus on a theme for the art I bought. In 1992, I decided to come back to Ghana from Cote d'Ivoire. So I came back to Ghana to set up a leasing company. And it was in Ghana that I really made a decision to create a collection, what I would call a collection. I also decided to make the theme of the collection, the core of the collection, Ghanaian artists. So I set out to look for the old Ghanaian artists, the new Ghanaian artists, the modern Ghanaian artists, the contemporary Ghanaian artists. And so as the collection stands today, let's say the core of it is Ghanaian art. I did not consciously set out to collect art as an investment. But I knew that the value of the work would increase. And they have increased. In most cases, probably tenfold. So, time had come to take out paintings that will be taken out without weakening the collection. Okay? And make room for new paintings. So, we selected about 15 paintings. To auction at Bonhouse. I wanted to have that experience, how it felt like. On the day of the exhibition, they had done the catalog for the auction. Therefore, you could see pictures in the catalog. And they had put estimated, projected prices on each one. So, you had an idea of how much each painting was going to fetch. I was actually surprised, and pleased with the increase in value of some of the works, of most of the works. Some of them are really surprisingly very high.
We started, the main dream was to sell contemporary art, painting and sculpture and pottery and that kind of thing. But when we came, we realized that even visitors, when they come in, they don't want to see, they didn't realize they are contemporary artists. They still collect their masks and their kente things, the traditional art, what they were collecting. And therefore, we had to embrace that area of the art, because that is what is known, and that is what brought people to Ghana. Tourists came to collect kente, adinkra. They collected things that they had read about, they known in the history, art history books and so on, the traditional arts. So we had to incorporate, particularly in this building this one, we certainly prevailed upon Mr. Lai, who designed the building, that he must give us a lot of room for the traditional art. Combining the two, I think, was the area that helped this thing to stand. Otherwise, it would have failed, I'm sure. Yes, there are young people who are now collecting, who are appreciating, yes. But it's, I must say, be honest about it, it's minute, it's small. It's not like America or London, where there are a lot of money floating. People want even to hide their money, and so they buy art. In Ghana, that kind of money is not there, it's not floating. We are dwelling on big businesses that have just come, and they are decorating their places. The staff they bring their homes done properly, and they put in art. The Ghanaian purchaser or collector is minute, very small. It's not big. I'm beginning to see my work appearing in what do you call it, auctions recently. It makes me happy.
Here in the book, not in the room, not with you on live, not with you, Hannah, at £21,000. Thank you very much.
Appearing, beginning to show. So yes, I'm enjoying what is happening. I'm following the trend with great interest, because it determines what's happening on the scene. It determines how much I sell my work, how much are they really worth. The future is good. My own work, I wish I have a second life that I can begin all over again and make some more money. But there's no money that what it matters is that the market, international market, is beginning to recognize that there is contemporary art in Ghana in particular, and in Africa in general. The younger ones are braver than us, than people like myself. We've been, what do you call it, conservative in a way. We haven't been courageous to explore. The younger ones are doing some more exploration. They are looking at other material methods and focus on certain areas and so on. So yes, the scene is vibrant. That tells you the scene is going to grow, and it's growing faster than I imagine, or faster than I want. Marwan at Kempinski, he's doing a good job. He is also helping the young artists, on the unknown ones, to take them out there and exhibit them.
My name is Gideon Appa, and this is my show inside Gallery 1957. It's entitled Love Letters. I first got in contact with the gallery in 2018. after a show at another space, and then I started working with them since. And then we've done a couple of shows. We did with 154 New York, 2018. I did a solo in that show. And then I'm doing another solo now in the gallery in 2019. I think what we would describe like very good gallery is the one that gives the artist freedom to expand, has interest in what the artist is building, not necessarily to sell, even though it's a very good point because they need to keep the doors of the gallery open. Most of my work takes that form. Most of the portraitures actually reference from photographs from a family album, and also that belonging to others, you know. But a couple of these are actually photographs from the album, but there are people that I don't know. But you know, somehow you can have people exchange photographs based on maybe their relations with others. Ghana is progressing steadily. You should see what young artists are doing. People are crazy with the art, and that vibrance is always necessary. It's important for the development of the arts in Ghana. With various shows, now institution buildings are coming in, and people are getting more and more involved, and I think we're doing well. We've gone to the Venice Biennale. The challenges we have with the art scene in Ghana is almost everyone's challenge. There's not a market. There's not enough galleries to show people. There's not institution buildings, you know, things like that. It's not there. We're just hoping.
When I was young, I used to sketch. I like to sketch. Once a friend asked me, it's like, what is my vision? And I told him I want to be one of the greatest artists the world has ever seen. After my national service, I moved to Accra. I started carving till now, filling up Paris. This one is a palm wine seller. And you know, actually, some of my themes I try to focus on things that we used to do and now there is no more. About this work, this is a woman selling palm wine. Now, this man, you know, in the bar, there are people who used to go there. If there is a beautiful woman there, they go there just to buy drinks because of the beautiful woman. And you know, people who like women used to, they like to dress. So this man represents them. You can see he's holding a queen in his hand and wanted to buy. Okay, now there are people who 24 hours they will be in the bar just talking about politics, gossiping and whatever. You see these two people, they represent them. When you go to every bar in Ghana here, you see people who every day you see them there talking about politics, gossiping. These people represent them. Now there are people who used to go there just to drink and just go away peacefully. This man represents this. You see the characters that I use, you can find it in every place that you go in Ghana. That's why it's our everyday life. That's why it's like the title of what I'm doing, the project is our everyday life in Ghana. I don't like selling my works because they are part of me and they are part of the community that I come from. Exhibition will be organized. After the exhibition, I will decide what to do with it, whether to keep it, to give it to my nation, or to sell it, or even to rent it. It's up to me after I finish the project.
Asafo Black is a collective of 6 artists from Ghana. Asafo Black emerged from the teachings of Blackstar Lines.
Most of our exhibitions tend to be very experimental, and also since most of our exhibitions don't have a certain curator, it takes an approach of an artist-led exhibition. So the artist creates the work acts more like a curator, becomes a curator, becomes a PR person. So we have this kind of octopus feature which we begin to assume. So basically our exhibitions are more like biomorphic forms. They take very loose forms, very organic forms as well. So for this particular exhibition, we're focusing on the idea of chance and also appropriating ideas from party culture. The exhibition is themed Truth or Dare.
I am Samuel Bakote and I paint exclusively in blood, animal blood collected from the abattoir. I think for the past 4 years I've been experimenting with it, and I'm interested in issues concerning animal abuse and animal brutality. The daily practice at the abattoir influences my narrative and my art pieces. I realize issues concerning religion is very difficult to talk about in our immediate society. So I end up hitting on issues like that. That's my art practice, and that's what I enjoy doing.